get in and get welcome everyone. Come in and get settled, and we will start our presentation momentarily. I see our numbers are jumping up. We're 82. Log in. Tell us where you are logging in from today.
Hi, Katie.
Iowa. Oh, they're coming fast. Coming through fast, but Indiana, New Orleans, Sacramento, Nashville, Orlando, Minneapolis. Welcome, everyone. We're just getting settled. We'll get started in a couple minutes. We just want to give people a chance to get in and get situated. Tell us where you're logging in from today. Richmond, Virginia, Georgetown, Texas, Berkeley, Cambridge, Claremont, Denton, Texas. I'd say we have our Canadian colleagues here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Let's see, my South Carolina colleague, Rebecca, is in Lancaster. I am in Charleston, South Carolina myself. Louisiana, how do you, Megan Lowe, Dr. Megan Lowe, how do you pronounce that? How do you pronounce your city? That is interesting. Oh, you can't take yourself off. Natchitoches. Okay.
Natchitoches.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
okay.
On the Natchitoches.
You don't pronounce that anything like it looks.
Nope. Okay, Melissa, I think we are at 170 participants, and so we are going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. I am Shannon Jones. I am the moderator for this session today, and I am so pleased to welcome you, and I'm equally excited to welcome Melissa Kash to present for us today. She's going to present documentation of employee performance: when, how, why, where, and what. Before we get started today, I want to go over a few logistical items with you. This session is being recorded. Captions are available during this session by clicking the Live CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Thanks to Brittany Barnes for providing the captioning for us during the session. Please use the Q&A feature for any presentation questions you may have. You can choose to do this anonymously. There will be a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please use the chat for general comments or technical issues. Danielle Skaggs will be monitoring the chat for any questions and comments. Danielle will also be adding some links into the chat. One link that she's going to add is for the collaborative resource sharing. So as Melissa is presenting, if you think of a related reading or a podcast, a video, or some other resource that you want to share, we ask that you share it to COM's recommended resources, share Zotero. The next link that you're going to see in the chat box will be the conference code of conduct. If you have not had an opportunity this week to go and review the code of conduct, I encourage you to go do so that you know what the behavioral expectations are, but you also know who you need to contact in the event that an incident happens during this session. And with that, I am going to turn the mic over to Melissa. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, hello, everybody. I'm coming from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I am the library director of the Metro campus at Tulsa Community College, and we have a college that has 4 library branches, and I am director of one of them. And I've been doing this for 7 years. Before that, I've worked as a research librarian at a medical school, and as a research librarian at a public library, and then as a hospital librarian at a local hospital. So I'm coming to you today to share with you what I've learned over the years about how to document employee performance. I'm not perfect at it. In fact, I learned a lot just preparing for this presentation today, and there's always something more to learn and a skill that you can improve over time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you won't be able to see me anymore, but please make sure you can chat and ask questions. Alrighty. Hello? Hello? Okay. Hello? This is she? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of a conference. All right, I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to stop my video. Sorry about that, everybody. All right, so it's really uncomfortable. I cannot see anybody, and I'm wondering if you guys can hear me and see the screen well. Can you please put that in the chat? Okay, thank you so much. Sorry about that weirdness. Okay, so, all right, so this presentation is documentation of employee performance: when, how, why, where, and what. So I would like for by the end of the session, for you to be able to explain why documentation of both positive and negative employee performance is necessary. I would like for you to be able to create documentation that's factual, fair, objective, complete, and consistent, and be able to use and store it appropriately as well. So first question is, what is documentation? Documentation is, for a new manager, for example, as a new manager, I had no idea what documentation was, or even that I was supposed to be doing it or anything like that. And eventually I did learn about this through working with human resources and other employees who taught me. So documentation is a chronological, concise, and specific description of the employee's actions and supervisor's actions as they occur. It's like a history of an employee's relationship with the department or the organization, for good and for bad. It's a collection of artifacts or documents related to this person's employment as well. So documentation doesn't always have to be negative, even though sometimes in the presentation it might sound like it's mostly negative. It can be positive as well, so keep that in mind. And also, but we all know that negative documentation sometimes is more crucial at moments when we need to take some action. So what is included in documentation? Actions, discussions, so many things: performance coaching incidents, investigations, reward and recognition, anything positive they've contributed, any disciplinary actions, performance evaluations, it's photographs even. I'm not sure about video and audio, but perhaps that could be included. I've heard that it can be. Statements, emails, monthly reports, completion certificates, commendations, text messages, timesheets, all kinds of things can be included in documentation. So why do it? Because you want to make sure that you're not doing anything illegal or unfair. And if you've ever wished human resources was more helpful when working with an employee, when you're having a problem with an employee, to make it easier on human resources to help you, if you have the proper documentation of what's happening, then you are helping human resources help you make legal and fair decisions. It also ensures that you, as a manager, are acting in an unbiased way and not on your behaviors or feelings. And it helps you see patterns and gain perspective. For example, I've sometimes felt like this employee is doing this all the time. They're driving me crazy. Why do they keep doing this? And then I go back and look, and really they've only done it like once or twice. And the last time they did it was a year ago. So it's not really as big as I made it out to be in my mind. And my documentation gave me perspective. Documentation is an important part of the disciplinary process. In a disciplinary process, it could look like this. Some people's at different organizations has different steps, but basically it looks like this, where first you communicate the standard or reiterate the standard, then you have an informal discussion, then a verbal warning, then a written warning, a memo, then you can progress to suspension, performance improvement plans, demotions, and then also finally to dismissal. So documentation is essential to conduct any type of disciplinary action, from an informal reiteration to the formal dismissal of a person. Even verbal conversations and preparations for those conversations need to be documented. For example, because of my mouth, I can't control myself sometimes, and I want to make sure I'm saying the right thing and not just what comes in my head. I write a script of what I want to say, even in a verbal warning or an informal discussion, so that I keep myself on topic and appropriate, fair, and all those things. And then I keep that script in my personal notes, and I document how that meeting went. So documentation is crucial for all kinds of things, including writing proposals for employee awards, writing letters of recommendation for a person who wants a new position, and wants to participate in a project or a program. It can be used for justification for a promotion or demotion, and it can be used to justify a salary increase or a decrease. It can provide evidence that performance issues were discussed, so it can help cover your bases and protect you as well. It can provide support to HR for discipline or termination of an unsuccessful employee. They're going to want to have documentation and facts in order for them to know they're making a good and fair decision. It provides evidence that the employee was terminated for reasons other than discrimination. So it helps you be fair and not discriminate. In the event of a lawsuit, documentation can show that the employee was treated legally and fairly. And it shows what steps you've made to help that person be successful, that you've done everything you could do. And in some events, the employee has not held up their end of the bargain. And finally, it can be used for annual reviews or other assessments. So here are some photographs that I just stole off the internet. And they are pictures of people in extremely embarrassing moments. There's a person who has toilet paper stuck in their pants, a person who has spinach stuck in their teeth, and a lady who has pantyhose, her skirt stuck in her pantyhose. And I can say that I've had my pantyhose incident once, and no one said anything about it, and I figured it out myself, and that was very embarrassing. But one of the most important reasons we can document is so we can provide feedback. You want to be a you have spinach in your teeth kind of manager. And it's uncomfortable in the moment, but it's kind and it's helpful and it shows you care. So if I had spinach in my teeth, I would think that, and the person told me, I would think they care about me, what happens to me, and they're on my side. There's a quote that says, "A friend is one who warns you, and a good supervisor is committed to the employee's growth and success that comes with praise and correction." We say all the time here at our work that feedback is love. And somebody asked in the chat about photographing mishaps. And one example I've used about photographing is whenever a person left and they were not able to come back to work, to get their things. I photographed their office just as it was and all the objects that were in it so that and before I packed it up, so that if anything happened about any question occurred about did I give them all their things back or something like that, then I would have that documentation. I didn't want to touch their stuff without taking pictures of it first. So, all right. One of the best books I've read about giving feedback is, I read the book Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, and she's very great. She taught me a lot of things in this book about feedback. And we as a group at our institution have read this book. Our leadership team read this book together. And it just basically tells you that giving feedback is hard and uncomfortable. One of my employees told me that getting feedback felt like getting underwear from your grandmother for Christmas, and you have to open it in front of everyone. Sometimes you get feedback in front of others. And you really need and appreciate that underwear, but at the same time, you really hate getting underwear. The most important reason to document is so we can give honest and helpful feedback. I don't ever feel like someone did me a favor when they weren't honest with me. I feel like if they didn't, it means they don't care enough to experience the discomfort of being honest to me and for me. And I feel like if I care about my employees, then I am willing to be uncomfortable and to let them know and to help them. So being polite and avoiding conflict are two ways to fail your staff when it comes to giving feedback. All right, so when should you document? You should document all the time. It should be routine. Don't wait for the annual review or for when a situation has arisen to start documenting. It should be part of your daily routine. Document all the time, every day. This gives you opportunities to handle things in the moment, which makes a greater impact for the employee, and it prevents things from festering. One other thing is, if it isn't documented, then it didn't happen, and you can't bring that up. It has to be documented. Documentation in the moment is far more accurate and useful than something that has to be pieced together after the fact, even if it's questionable whether you should even try to piece something together after the fact. I don't know about yours, but I know my memory cannot be trusted. So, how to document? Some documentation is in the form of artifacts that you collect, like texts, emails, recordings, certificates, and some documentation must be written by you. Two main documents you would write are your personal notes that only you will see, and memos that others will see. Memos are based on your personal notes. Write clear, objective, specific statements about what the employee needs to improve or the wonderful thing they've done. So some things to keep in mind when you're documenting, whether you're writing notes for yourself or a memo that others will see, is to prepare the writing with the third parties in mind. Keep the following people in your head. I always keep my boss in my head, the HR, I keep legal counsel, I keep the employee in my head, and whoever else I think might be need to read this later. Scholarship committees, hiring committees, award nomination teams. Keep the audience in your mind. Also, write in third person. When you are writing the report, you should address it as if you were an outsider writing a story as to what happened. Use the party or parties' names, or use third person pronouns like he, she, it, they. Be sure to record specific dates when behavior or events occurred. Add the time and place as well if it makes sense. And it's important to be able to reflect on how often something has happened or not happened. Describe facts in chronological order. Be very linear with documentation, whether you're storing it or creating it. Include the dates of any previous discussions and documentation of those discussions as well. And one of the most important things I think to remember when documenting is to describe the conduct and not the employee. A person's personality or appearance should not be described in documentation. Be careful writing things related to people's protected class, including age, religion, sex, national origin, color, or race. So for a couple of examples of those, it's okay to say, Bob appeared to be intoxicated. He was stumbling and slurring his words. That's what he appeared to be. But you can't say something like, Bob is ugly and people don't want to look at him. It's affecting our customer service. That would be inappropriate. Also, you wouldn't want to say, Bob is Jewish and that's the reason he doesn't fit in. But you could say something that relates to religion like this. Bob makes jokes about Jewish people, and James, who is Jewish, has told me he finds it offensive. So it just depends on the context. Make sure you're being careful about those protected class issues. If for disciplinary reasons, write what actions made the disciplinary action necessary. Include, of course, the who, what, when, and where, but why is kind of tricky because only the employee can know why they did something. You can't objectively say why another person does something. So be careful with that. That's an interpretation of what you saw. And interpretations don't belong in documentation. Note the tone of voice, the body language, and the frequency and duration of behavior. That's useful. And be especially cognizant of how the impact of the team, to the organization, to the customer, and write that as well. The impact is very important. And finally, be very objective. To be objective is to be not influenced by your personal feelings. And we all have personal feelings and opinions about our employees. But when it comes to documentation, we have to leave those out and just present the facts and also use verifiable facts. For example, timesheets, messages, things that you can collect documentation. Behavioral documentation is descriptive, not interpretive. Just describe what you saw and what you heard. Yes, pretend like you're Judge Judy. Avoid generalizations and assessment of unseen events, such as attitude or motivation. Any statements about things like that need to be supported by the descriptions of behavior. So if you're going to say say something about someone's attitude, then make sure you describe what that looked like. So avoid subjective terminology. A lot of times it's easy to write these things. It's harder to write more descriptive sentences, but sometimes we resort to someone has a good attitude or a great attitude, or they have an attitude problem. They're not a team player. Like I've seen myself say it was very reliable, customer oriented. These are all things I've said, but these are things that mean different things to different people. And we need to describe what their behaviors and actions were. And if we say these things, explain what makes you think that this person is customer oriented or reliable. So I've got some examples here, and I want you to put in the webinar chat just what you think as we're going through it. So any comments that you want to make. An example of a couple of different ways to write something is the employee copped an attitude when confronted about his poor attendance. And a better way to say that is the employee raised his voice, made several negative statements about the value of our meeting, and provide those verbatim, as much as a verbatim as you can get it. He denied that he had an attendance problem and slammed his fist down on the table. So this is much more descriptive, and a person can definitely get more of an idea of what exactly happened. And yes, the second line describes the attitude. Here's another example. She looked hostile. What does hostile look like? Well, the second line describes what hostile looks like to this person. She leaned forward until she was 1 inch from my face. Her face was red and sweaty. Her veins were popping out on her forehead. That sounds pretty hostile. And another example is Barbara came back from lunch drunk. And then a better way to say this is when Barbara came back from lunch, she seemed disoriented. She looked about and asked for help to get to the office. I took her arm and guided her to her seat. I noticed her clothes were disheveled and she smelled of alcohol. When she spoke, she was really loud and her words were slurred. So that's a much better way to say it. Now I have a couple of examples that don't have the answer right there, and I want you to continue writing in the chat what you think could be improved about these situations. So what do you think would make this better? On June 20th, 2021, I saw Lena pick her nose at the information desk today around noon. That drives me so crazy. I met with her privately in my office shortly afterward to speak with her. I told her that my expectations are that she conduct nasal hygiene activities privately, either in the bathroom or in her office. Geez, you think she would know that? Or do you think she knows that? So what would make this, what's inappropriate about this documentation? What would make it better? Remove the opinions. Leave out G's. Yeah, not focus on how Lena's actions make you feel. Remove editorial comments like, that drives me crazy. Somebody says everything is inappropriate about it. Did patrons care? How did Lena respond to the meeting? That's important, yes. This sounds like a social media post. Yeah, it kind of does. What's the impact? Have you had this conversation before? One of the things that about this conversation is not to make assumptions about what people know. Geez, you would think she knows that. Well, this seems very obvious to most of us, but maybe this person has no idea that they're even doing it. They're not aware of themselves, and they're not aware that it's socially inappropriate. And exactly, have we provided any tissues? Is there an alternative? Yeah. So, very good. Here's another example. How would you make this better? Marcy acted crazy today. She was heard shouting in the hallway, "You can't make me be quiet." She was moving her body erratically and running around like a maniac. Toby called campus police. It took less than a minute for them to arrive. We moved students and staff to safe areas per our emergency procedures. Campus police secured the area and removed Marcy from the area. We have all thought for some time that Marcy has bipolar disorder. So somebody is telling me that there's way too much speculation. Making medical diagnoses and calling people crazy is inappropriate. Scrap it all, very ableist. Taking out the first and last sentence would fix it. Why does it matter how long it took the police to arrive? Yeah, what happened to Marcy with the police? Some things that I know that are wrong with this is that saying Marcy acted crazy today is really not a way to start this. She was moving her body erratically and running around like a maniac. We need to change running around like a maniac to describe what exactly does that look like. Then also my questions is who's Toby? And we moved students and staff. Who is we? Also, this part about bipolar disorder, you should never interpret. Yes, Toby probably needs some documentation too. Um, we probably need to ask Toby what his perception of the incident was, and have him write it. Campus Beliefs at our institution would probably ask Toby to write a statement, as well as me, the director, if this was me responding to this. So this bipolar disorder thing and maniac thing are interpretations. Yeah, is there any history to this? Did this come out of the blue? Does she make erratic movements as part of her normal self, or seemingly erratic movements? Yeah, what's normal for her? That's a good point. One of my staff, we have an autistic patron who comes regularly, and whenever he sits at the table, he rocks back and forth very, very wide, making very wide passes, and it's very, like, it looks like maybe he might almost fall out of his chair. And whenever he's watching a video or something, he comments loudly, and sometimes we have to remind him that he's being loud, and it's just that's all he needs, is just a reminder. But one of my staff was telling me, pushing me about it. What do we do? Should I call campus police, et cetera, et cetera? And I looked at him like, I don't think we should do anything. I think we're doing everything we should do about the situation. If someone doesn't like it, we can move them somewhere else. There are plenty of areas to sit and be in this library. So I did contact the accessibility resources, because he pushed me. I really want to know what to do about this, and I contacted them because they're the experts at our campus on this, and I'm like, what should we do? And they said nothing. So yeah, so the situation could be, in a context that this behavior is completely normal, and the other people might just need to adjust and stop making assumptions. And if Marcy's truly having a breakdown, then we can get her some help. And this documentation can be part of that process. All right, so here's an example of a documentation that I've prepared before. I've changed the names to protect the people who were involved. But on March 19th, 2015, I described that Roger was absent and that he did not report the absence. People tried to contact him and he didn't respond. And so I've recorded the specific dates of the behavior occurrence, and I've also explained that I've told this person about this before and what day I told them about it. It was during their training. I've included an excerpt of the handout that I gave this person on that date. So I've also given a clear description of the expectations. Then also I wrote in my documentation that I met with Roger on fairly soon after the incident to talk about the absence. And I told him that I reiterated that it's not acceptable. I provided another hot copy of the handout and discussed the procedure with him again. So I gave him a plan for how to improve. And then also I gave him a deadline where I explained that the matter must improve immediately and no further absences will be tolerated. And then I explained what would happen if he did not start coming in on time and communicating well about that. So I described the consequences. So, how to document. So once you've got some documentation down, it's important to analyze it. Right, you would if, yes. So after the meeting, you would document what Roger had to say and how that went, definitely. And then also keep documenting his performance after that. So before using your documentation, take some time to analyze it. Still remain objective. Ask yourself the following questions. How serious is the matter? Is this a personality difference, perhaps, like between two employees that you're trying to mediate a conflict? Is it a personality difference between those two, or is someone harassing the other? One situation is more serious than the other. How long has it been happening? When did the problem begin? Have there been other issues with this employee, or is this just an isolated event? How often does it happen? Does this happen all the time, or it was a single unprofessional incident? Or does this person have a pattern of behavior? Are there any performance reviews that you can look at, or write-ups that you've done? So gather up all the surrounding information. What policies have been violated? If a policy has been violated, find that exact policy. And then think about what were the employee's intentions. Sometimes intentions don't matter if someone does something egregious like sexual harassment, perhaps, but sometimes their intentions are not malicious and they just either don't know or aren't aware, and they just need to be told how to behave and what the expectations are. Are there any extenuating circumstances? For example, sometimes an employee may be on FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act. They may have protected leave, which allows them to call in late. It allows them to miss days, and because they have a condition that requires them, or they need to do that. Then another thing you would need to think about is, was the person provoked? Are they having personal issues, medical problems, something like that? And then one of the most important things is, can the person do what you're asking them to do? Are they able? Have they been trained? Are they aware they are violating the rules? Have you ever told them this policy? Do they know where it is? Have they been taught? How is the matter affecting other people? Is it affecting morale? Is it causing everybody else to do more work? Is it a hostile work environment that's being created? And finally, is there a disciplinary protocol in place? So you would want to match your disciplinary protocol to the organizations and what has been done before, so that you don't treat anyone differently than you treat another person. Yes, keep documenting so you can see patterns. All right, so at some point your notes, your personal notes, are going to need to be put into a memo. After you've gotten through the reiterations of the policies and procedures, after you've verbally talked with this person, progressing discipline includes writing memos. Excuse me. I've got allergies really bad here in Tulsa. Okay, so the reprimand memo should contain these elements. It should say to, and that's to the employee, and from you. You should CC HR and not address the note to HR. Include your supervisor on it in the CCs. I usually do. In the body, you have to describe exactly what needs to change. Spell it out so that there's no question of what the employee needs to do. Prepare a detailed action plan that the employee can use to improve performance, or clearly describe the expectations so that the employee can create their own action plan from it. Make sure you set deadlines, indicate support and willingness to assist in case the employee has questions, because at this point you're still working for this employee to succeed. You're still wanting to give them support and help them succeed. And then make sure you clearly describe the consequences of if they don't improve or they don't change their behavior. At the end of the document, ask the employee to sign it. Make a spot in it to sign it, for them to sign it, and for you to sign it. One important thing is that and I always tell the person, you signing it does not indicate that you agree with this. It indicates that this discussion happened and I provided you this memo. If the employee happens to refuse to sign, write that on the memo, initial it, and date it, and you can keep that as part of the documentation. Then after you've written it, Check it for clarity. Is the documentation understandable? Would a person who has nothing to do with this situation or doesn't work here, like say a lawyer somewhere, would they understand what I'm saying? Is it clear about why the issue is serious? Is the problem obvious? Then, after you do that, review it. At this point, you should have definitely contacted HR already. And so after you've written the memo, make sure they look at it. I always do, and HR has been extremely helpful to remind me of things that shouldn't be in my memo or something should be said better. Also, it means there are no surprises to HR or your supervisor. And if something needs to progress further, these people are ready, they know what's happened, and they're prepared. So this is an example of an actual memo I sent to a fictional person, of course. And this is how I wrote it. Of course, you can see the to and the from, or to the employee from me, the date, the reason for the memo, and who it's going to be copied to. And I say to Jay, I've talked with you on several occasions regarding your attendance, yet it has not improved. So in this section, I'm saying what is the behavior that needs to change. Many times your shift has to be covered by others in public services, which causes an unfair burden when they must change their schedules to cover the desk. This is describing impact to others. Though you are scheduled to work 40 hours per pay period, you have only worked a complete 40 hours twice since July 1st, 2017. Where other part-time employees have worked about 970 hours at this point in the fiscal year, you've just worked 845. And these are verifiable facts that I've included here. In the past 30 days, you have either not worked your shift at all or have left early 8 times out of 16 days scheduled. In addition, you continue to not include me on texts or emails when you are notifying the circulation team leader that you will be absent despite multiple reminders. It goes on with expectations. I expect you to work as scheduled, including arriving on time and staying until the end of your shift. Be fully engaged in your duties. Include me on all communication when you are going to be absent. And then I say the following. I want you to know that the service you provide to the library is valuable because this person's service is valuable. They do a great job when they're there. As an essential member of our team, you are expected and needed to be fully present when you are scheduled to work. And then I explained the deadline, immediate and sustained improvement in your attendance is required, and then the consequence. Otherwise, disciplinary action up to and including termination will be taken. And then there's a section for acknowledgement. Thank you. My HR department really helped me with this. I also send this to them by email. I usually send it to the employee and CC Human Resources and my supervisor so that they know who all received it and that it's serious. This is different from discussing performance in an email. This is a reiteration or just to providing the document after the fact. I've talked to this person face to face about it, which is important. I wouldn't just send a memo all by itself. All right, so after a formal disciplinary meeting, make sure you provide a copy to the person, the employee, and whomever you've CC'd. Put it in your documentation, collection of documentation about this person. Document in your notes what happened during this meeting and continue to remain objective. Then it's just wait at this point. Give the employee an opportunity to respond or improve, and then make sure you set up a time to review the progress. And that tells the employee that you're going to check back and that this will be attended to. They cannot escape. And then just continue documenting their behavior. All right, where should you document? I document in a whole lot of different places, and we use OneDrive here in the cloud, Microsoft 365. Documentation can be done in email, Excel, handwritten notes, text messages, photographs, calendars, all kinds of places. But I don't know if you guys know who Harriet the Spy is, but I remember reading this book when I was a little girl in middle school. And Harriet was a little girl who had a notebook, and in her notebook, she filled it with honest things about her parents, her classmates, and her neighbors. And every day she had a spy route. She observed people and noted anything of interest to her, which was all fine and good. But then one day her friends found it and read it. So you don't want to be like Harriet. Make sure all your documentation is in a secure location behind. I know it's very important. It is extremely important to the morale of everyone and how smoothly things go. It really does make a difference. Make sure your documentation is in a secure location behind your IT system protections. Don't leave. I have a notebook, but I'm very protective of it, and I'm protective of my screens. I have screen protectors so that people who are sitting next to me or behind me cannot see my screen, things like that. Just be very protective of your information. So some examples, and you may keep your documentation in a completely different place in completely different ways, but I wanted to just show you what I do. This is my OneDrive, and I have a folder that's labeled personnel. And in that folder, I have a list, another set of folders, and there's one folder for each employee. And inside each folder, it kind of looks like this. This is the folder for the fictional employee, Jay Jones. And in the folder, there's all kinds of things. There's his application, the interview notes I had whenever he applied, forms that were HR forms, reviews. I've got some achievement awards and certificates they've earned. And then also, as you go down, you can see that there starts to be some conversations about absenteeism. And I've included those conversations there. There's a conversation, a second conversation, somebody has sent an email complaint, there's a third conversation, and then there's the memo. So I probably had too many conversations, probably should have done the memo the third time. But anyway, then as you can see on June 2013, I had a meeting with HR, and I kept notes during that meeting. So I could have that information as well. Also, my email mirrors what I keep in my OneDrive. So for simplicity, I have also a folder called personnel. And even though I would never discuss employee performance in an email, sometimes things come in email that you want to keep in your documentation, like like people write kind things like thank you notes and commendations sometimes. And they also send complaints, and they can send all kinds of things about it that could be important for documentation. Oftentimes my employees send me, well, I earned this certificate, and I just pop it into this folder. So also, I know there's some of you guys are talking about using notebooks to write notes, and I do use a notebook, but I also have an Excel spreadsheet that's more private and behind single sign-on security. And the documentation is called staff documentation in an Excel document. And this is kind of what it looks like. This looks like gibberish, but it is a representation of what I do. And I just have a tab for each employee, and I just keep running. It's very simple. I just keep the date, and I write what happened in the other column. And this is sortable and searchable, and it really works well for me. All right, I want to talk with you about mistakes. And some of these I've made myself, like probably all of them, but the biggest mistake is not documenting at all. And I've made this mistake before. It's not fair to the employee or to the organization. It can be the difference between winning or losing a lawsuit, or between running a well-run department and a chaotic department. And you should never rely on your memory. So documentation is a very great substitute for memory, which is very faulty. Another mistake is to inconsistently apply performance standards. You should hold all employees to the same standards, otherwise you might be charged with discrimination. Do not discuss employee performance in an email. It must be in person or by Zoom. I really rather have it in person and not by Zoom, but sometimes we can't get by because people work remotely. But you need to be able to gauge the body language of the person, and that can tell us more than what the employee says. Also, it can be, if you're in the moment discussing something, you can clear up misconceptions or they can ask questions and things like that that you could not do if you were just sending somebody this memo in an email, which can be greatly misconstrued. Be extremely clear so there's no question. Speak plainly and don't use this library jargon or acronyms that we use. Explain what everything is. Bad timing. Documenting and not documenting if some things happen as bad timing, and it really isn't as effective as doing it in the moment. Backdating documentation or backdating a document is completely not okay and could render the document unusable, like in a court. Not knowing the audience. Always consider who might read the document. Your boss, HR, the employee, anybody, even people who are outside the college, say, or your organization, because our college is susceptible to the Open Records Act, and people can request records by law. They're allowed to have them. So make sure you wouldn't put anything in your documentation that you wouldn't want the entire world to read, just in case. And a few more mistakes. Do not let your personal feelings or bias affect your decisions. Be objective, and don't even include them in your personal notes. Making blanket assumptions. Not everybody is not the same. So assume, like, for example, the assumptions that were made in our examples. Being dishonest. Always be honest in your documentation and with your employees. And the biggest mistake I think people can make is viewing HR as an opposition. I really view our HR as an ally and a partner. Of course, it's not always perfect. They have their own biases and their own feelings, which can affect things. But I always consult HR early in the process. It's meant to protect myself. They are experts in things that I am not an expert in, like employment law and things like that. And I've even had HR sit in on meetings with me, and if I thought that there was going to be a big problem, so that I could have another person's as a witness. And they've been extremely helpful to me. So now I will move on to questions, and I am happy to take any questions you have.
Hey, well, Melissa, thank you so much for your presentation. First of all, we have about 6 minutes left in the presentation, so we won't be able to get to all of the questions that we have in the chat box, but please give Melissa a round of applause, and we'll see if we can get through 2 or 3 of these questions. The
Okay.
first question is, do you also find that having good documentation helps you to realize whether or not an employee has had directed coaching on specific incidents?
Yes. Um, that's one of the most important things I ask myself, is when I'm dealing with an employee, is it they can't or is it they won't? And I ask myself, have I given them every opportunity to know this? Have they been trained? Have I talked to them about it before? And if I haven't, then it's my fault. And I need to do that and see what the person does. And I feel like a lot of times that will correct the matter, and it was just me.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, my camera's not on. Um, the next question is, What about documenting a supervisor or higher ups and their poor behaviors? Would these strategies work or something else to consider?
I think that these would work excellently for that. I'm lucky enough to have not ever had to do that, so I don't know if there's anything else that you would do. This seems like it would work great in that situation. I would just reiterate to be objective and um, question yourself, question your feelings and your motives, and make sure that you are very objective and not subjective in what you write, and make sure the problem is obvious again, and that uh, things like that.
Okay, thank you. And the next question says mastery and greatness strike some as uncomfortably white normative concepts in the context of evaluation.
Mhm.
How do we make non-punitive space for professionals who do not strive to perform in these ways?
Right. Well, Brene Brown is a white woman, and I really don't know if I know how to answer this question. That's a good question that I would need to think about. Um, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. I think maybe you might mean, for example, I strive for mastery and greatness. I want to be the best at my job, but not everyone has that real drive, and not everyone needs to have it. And and I have to remind myself sometimes that it's okay that they don't want to uh, shoot for the stars, if you will. I don't know if that's what you mean or not, but I would have to think about that.
Okay. And I think we just got time for one more question.
Okay.
Um, says I want to make sure to ensure that these descriptive behaviors are not gendered or racialized and filled with bias.
Right.
How do you recommend supervisors take their hidden biases toward gentility, aka whiteness, into account when recalling their interpretive experiences?
Right. I would say the because we all have these things, our internal biases about race and things like that. I would say that having human resources read it and having your supervisor read it are the best ways. For example, in our human resources, there are people, a diverse group of people who can help me see things from different perspectives, from different gender spectrum, different races, different backgrounds, and having those other people read it, I think is very helpful to make sure that you don't veer off into something like that.
Hey, well, Melissa, can you stop sharing your screen?
Sure.
There's been a request to
Okay.
continue seeing you.
All right.
Um,
Hi, everybody.
are you open to because we have a fair number of questions that we just aren't going to have time to get to. Are you open to people reaching out to you
Yes.
individually or separately?
Yes.
After the fact. Okay, well, you all hear it. She's open. Melissa's open to you all reaching out to her. Let's give Melissa another round of applause for an excellent presentation and also for answering, the questions um, today. It was really a pleasure to have you as our speaker during this session. Now, before we close the session today, I'd like to point out the evaluation survey that is available for you all to complete. I know that many of the presenters have been very grateful to receive the feedback. So I know Melissa
Absolutely.
will appreciate the feedback. You can find the evaluation link in Sketch. Is labeled feedback survey and is directly above the session description. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Melissa, for the presentation. And I hope you all enjoyed the keynote and I hope you've all enjoyed the conference. And we will see you at some other library venue in the coming weeks. So Have a good one, and I believe that all of the slides will be
They
available
they
on,
are
the
online.
conference. Oh, there your
Yes.
slides are already there. Okay,
If
great.
you want the full version of the slides, I did not include slides with graphics because I do not want them out on the web forever. I want, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
copyright, fair use, etc. If you want the full set of slides or have any questions for me, please email me. I would be happy to send them to you or answer the question.
Okay. Well, again, thank you all, and thank you, Melissa, and
Thank you.
that concludes this session.
All right. Thank you, everybody.